First of all, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to all of you for being here, but also to say that I feel a really great responsibility to be opening the opening plenary. So if I'm a little bit nervous, please forgive me. And I want to start by telling you what I'm not going to talk about. First, I'm not going to give you numbers about the crisis in Europe. First of all, because I think that you've heard this many times. Second of all, because I remembered a sentence that someone was carrying in a sheet of paper in the first big demonstration against austerity in Portugal that said, "Stop treating the markets as people and people as numbers." So I don't want to give you numbers today. And also because I think you know here in the US very well what crisis, what cuts, and what austerity means. It has been happening here for the last 30 years. The difference between what is happening here and what is happening in Europe is the speed. So if you want, you can try to imagine what it is to have a process of full neoliberalization applied not in 30 years, but in 3. And this is what austerity looks like in Southern Europe. And I'm also not going to talk about numbers because we all know that austerity is not about numbers. Austerity is a political program to alter profoundly the relation of forces between the classes, between labor and capital. It sustains itself right now in Southern Europe through the dependency that the debt creates, so the debt is kind of the excuse, with the aim of implementing, as I said, the fastest, most violent neoliberal agenda of the destruction of the social state, the reduction of trade union power, and the privatization of public services and goods. Austerity is a brutal attack on labor and social rights. And it is also a brutal attack on democracy, because austerity is a political program that can only prevail when democracy fails and people are led to believe that there are no alternatives. And this is what we call the dictatorship of the debt. And this is the dictatorship that we have been fighting against. The second thing that I'm not going to talk about is about our differences, for a change. Today, for a change, I want to talk about our similarities. I want to talk about the commonalities between this new movements that have arisen and have shaken Southern Europe, but also Germany, and also in a way, I think, the US. And for this, I want to propose 5 theses to understand what we have been building in the past years. And by us, I mean the movements on the streets, but also the people that are part of broad left parties in Portugal, Bloc, of Die Linke in Germany, of Syriza in Greece, of Podemos in Spain, and so on and so forth. So, thesis number 1, broadening the idea of class. So to borrow an expression, since I am in New York, I think the idea of class is extremely present again in the movements that we have today in Southern Europe. Even if it's not communicated or formulated in the way that it was. When we are talking about the 99 against the 1%, we are talking about class. And this is very important. This is a central point, I think. It's a new quality of the movements that we have been seeing and taking part of in Southern Europe. The second thing is still in the idea of broadening the idea of class, is that these movements, although they have been led and started in many senses by young people, they have an intergenerational character. And this is very important. There is intergenerational solidarity, and it would not have been possible in another way. The third thing is that labor, precarity, and unemployment are the center of people's preoccupations today. And so they must be the center of our political preoccupations today. So I think this is the first thesis to understand the dynamics and the characteristics of the movements. Thesis number 2, democracy against the dictatorship of the debt. So another central question for all of these movements is the questioning of the political system that we live in. It's a political system that does not represent us. It's a political system that betrays us, that betrays our votes, our expectations, our futures. And so the fights on the streets, the occupations of the squares, but also how this movement reflects itself into broad left parties, into a victory of Syriza in Greece, or local victories in Spain just last weekend, it is the idea that this system, as it is constituted, does not represent us and we need to change it. But it's also because we need to, in a very, very pragmatical way, we need to rescue our parliaments and our states and our streets from the hands of the non-elected technocrats of the IMF, of the European Central Bank, and of the European Union that have been ruling our lives for the last 5 years. Thesis number 3, solidarity is our weapon. From the networks of solidarity that we see in Greece and that are basic pillars to understand the resistance and the growth of a political alternative in Greece, to the movements to prevent the evictions in Spain, the idea of solidarity has become a practice again. Because only in and through this practice can we communicate that collective problems like unemployment, poverty, hunger, the lack of housing cannot be solved individually. And this is practical solidarity, when people stand together and make solidarity more than just a slogan, but a political practice. Thesis number 4, we need parties, but of another kind. I think this is an important thesis, because if we're looking at Southern Europe, and also if we're looking at Germany, a very important thing that happened in the last 10 to 15 years, more or less, was the formation of new broad left parties to the left of the traditional liberalized social democracy. So we need parties, but of another kind, means the understanding of the necessity of left-wing parties that dispute the state and that use the parliament as a bullhorn for the movements and not as an instrument in themselves. It's also the understanding of the necessity of building common political programs with common strategies and goals. And it's also the idea that these parties that directly dispute the basis of the liberalized social democracy and that refuse to be responsible for applying austerity. And this is the success. I think this is one of the reasons why we can understand the success of Syriza or of Podemos, less of Bloc. Portugal is in a particular situation right now. But it is precisely this. We refuse to be the crutches of a dying, liberalized social democracy in Europe. And the last thing, still about the parties, is the very, very important understanding that in moments of crisis, parties have to fulfill 2 functions. 1, they have to be an instrument of maximum social intervention, so they have to engage with the social movements in grassroots community organizing and in the trade unions. And 2, while they do this, at the same time, they have to have an autonomous political program that fights for state power. It does not have to be the most revolutionary program ever. It has to be a program that can win social majorities and be applicable today, and eventually, and I think that is also the aim, lay the groundwork for a revolutionary moment through the idea of what we call, or what we could call, non-reformist reforms. Thesis number 5, and this is the last one. As I said, there were 5. We are greater than we think we are. What we have seen in experiences of the occupations of the squares in Greece or in the Spanish state or in the US, or also in the massive demonstrations against austerity and against the crisis in Portugal, or now in Germany with Blockupy, is that there are many more people out there who want to participate and are not yet organized. So we need to go get them. This is a very important responsibility we have. This also means that the street has to be polyphonic. And what do I mean with this? People become politically active for different reasons, and without losing the centrality of what I was saying, the issues that are central, the questions of the crisis, the questions of labor, without losing the centrality of these issues, and without losing the understanding of the need of a common political program, we have to be able to make synthesis in a way that I can recognize in the struggle of the other my own struggle. And so the street needs to be polyphonic. So we need to keep on searching for the possibilities of becoming active and turn them into persistency. It's the persistency that carries on a political memory, even in times of defeat, the persistency of activism, even in times of lower struggle, the persistency that is, to use an expression from Daniel Ben Said, since France is not here represented today, it's a slow impatience that never allows the feeling of indignation to disappear. And I believe this is our task. This is the task of the people of the left, to grow roots and to be able to turn a generalized feeling of despair and anger into action, organization, and hope. Because it is only in collective action that we can articulate the possibility of alternatives to capitalism, because it is only in action that people believe that these alternatives are possible if we build them together. Thank you.